Most intermediate guitarists, they know all of the same pentatonic scale shapes that all the professional guitarists are using. However, when they try to use them to solo, everything sounds kind of robotic, noodly, and disconnected. In this video, I'm going to show you how to take those same pentatonic scales and turn them into solos that sound like they're telling a story. A story with a clear beginning, middle, and end. When we think about playing solos this way, every phrase and every note you play is going to sound so much more intentional. Now, I've helped hundreds of intermediate guitarists go from just running up and down scale shapes to telling solos that actually sound musical. That means this video is not going to be another learn all the modes video or learn these 5 blues licks. That's not really what you need at the moment. We're just going to keep things insanely simple so you can start sounding better today. Before we get started, if you want to progress faster or you don't want to have to figure out how to do all of this on your own, check out my Triad Mastery Program. It's a complete training and coaching system all in one place. You can get started by checking out the link in the description or scanning the code that's on your screen at the moment. Some of the greatest guitar solos of all time, they feel like they're taking you on a journey, as if they're telling a story, right? They don't just wander around aimlessly, they have a sense of direction and they feel intentional. Just like how stories have a clear beginning, middle, and end, a great solo is also built from phrases that have a beginning, middle, and end that feel complete. So later in this lesson, I'm going to show you my beginning, middle, and end formula for creating those phrases. But first, we need the foundation that makes everything work. Without it, we're going to be hopeless when it comes to creating phrases that sound musical. We need to understand the chords we're playing over the top of. So today we're going to be looking at a backing track that uses just 3 chords. We have D minor, then we have G major, and then later on it kind of throws in this A major as a turnaround. So I'm going to link the backing track in the description if you want to use it later on and try applying all the things that I'm going to show you in today's lesson. But first, let's cover the important part, right? Instead of playing these chords as these big chunky bar chords, instead we're going to play the triads that are hiding inside of these chords, right? So for D minor, I have this D minor triad shape that's hiding on the D, G, and B strings like this. This is technically a second inversion minor triad. You don't really need to worry about that kind of stuff. Just learn this shape, right? Then for G major, I have a root position G major triad that's hiding inside of there on the D, G, and B strings. Again, don't worry about like root position or the inversions. Just learn the shape at the moment. And then for A major, we just transpose this by moving up 2 frets. Again, these triad shapes, they're hiding inside of your bar chords. Now, you might be thinking, why are we using triad shapes instead of the full chords? That's because triad shapes are so much easier to visualize inside of your scale shapes. When you can see where the chords exist inside of your scales, the neck becomes so much simpler to understand and less confusing, and it feels so much more connected. Once you see the triads, they become your roadmap. Think about them as your North Star. You're never going to be confused about which direction you're supposed to be heading in when you're soloing. They'll show you exactly where to start and end your phrases, so it sounds like your solo is actually going somewhere, not just wandering around. And again, endings are really, really important. They matter. Without them, even the best ideas that have a really good beginning are going to eventually fall flat. Now, here's what I mean by that. Imagine you're reading a book that was just one sentence that continued for 300 pages long. There was no full stops at all. For all the American viewers out there, a full stop is what we call a period over here in England. But again, imagine you're reading a book that was just one sentence that lasted forever, right? Or alternatively, imagine you're watching a movie that was just one scene that lasted for like 3 hours long, right? You can imagine no matter how good the start of that book or that movie is, without an ending, is eventually going to become very messy and very boring. And that's exactly what happens when we solo without understanding how to end our phrases as well. It sounds disconnected because there's no resolution. We're either just pouring out random notes from the scale shape and playing what I call musical diarrhea, or we're just kind of like endlessly overthinking how we're supposed to be ending our phrase and we end up just playing nothing, right? every story needs an ending, and so does your guitar phrases as well. In music, the ending is called a resolution. That's landing on a note that feels like it belongs, right? And resolution notes are always chord tones. They're always either a root, a third, or a fifth, right? And that's where triads come into play. These little chord shapes, these triad shapes, they're like signposts on the fretboard. They show you exactly which notes to aim for, so your phrases start and end and resolve with intention. They always sound musical when you land on a triad note. To get used to this, just practice playing individual notes inside of each triad as the chords change. So here's what I mean by that. Here's what I do when I'd play along to the backing track, just using triads and not thinking about scale shapes. So just start off with playing individual notes from your triad shapes. So I'm just playing individual notes from D minor at the moment. Try sliding into those notes to give a sense of movement. And again, always be thinking about the next chord where you're going next. So in the back of my mind, I'm already thinking I need to go to G major soon. And again, this is just a single individual note from that G major shape. Then think about going back to D. Again, always be thinking about where your next triad shape is. Again, I've got A major next. How do I get to A major from here? And again, all we have to do is play an individual note. So once you can confidently land on a chord tone for each chord by using the triad shapes, you're ready to take the next baby step. And that's to just sprinkle in a couple scale notes here and there around those exact same triad notes that we've just been using. Here's the rule. We're going to think about the triads as our home base. And we're not going to think about using the entire full scale shape just yet. That's going to come later on in the video. But first, we're going to prioritize the triad above everything else by sprinkling in just a few scale notes here and there around the triad. So think about it like cooking the perfect steak, right? The triad is the prime cut of meat, and the scale notes are like the salt and pepper that you use to season and enhance the flavor of that steak. So we're only going to start small and just add in a few notes here and there around the triad shapes we've already just been playing. So we played D minor like this. Now I can kind of play a couple scale notes around that, and I'm going to call this like a triad scale kind of cluster thing. We're only going to stay on the exact same three notes, the D, G, and B string. And we can play this little kind of like scale fragment around that D minor triad. You can kind of see that like that scale fragment, it includes a bunch of notes from this triad shape. So they kind of work quite nicely over the top of this triad. So when D minor comes around and we're improvising, we're going to stick to this triad and we're going to try adding in a couple notes here and there around that triad shape. Now, when G major rolls around, we go to this G major triad shape that we used earlier, and we're going to play this kind of scale fragment that exists around that as well. And again, you can see all of these notes. They kind of exist around that G major triad shape. So these are the notes we're going to use to sprinkle in here and there around G major. And then for A major, because we're using that same major triad shape, we just transpose everything up 2 frets. So it's the same kind of little scale fragment that we're going to use around that. By thinking about things this way, we're still prioritizing the triad, but we're also adding in just enough spice to make things sound a bit more musical as well. Sometimes when we only use the triads, it can sound a bit boring and basic. It still sounds musical, still sounds like we're using the right notes. It sounds a lot less random when we only use triads, but it can be a bit boring, right? but by adding in a couple notes here and there around that, it's just enough spice to make it sound more musical. And again, this is what helps so many guitarists break through, is understanding how to prioritize the triad above everything else, and then just kind of sprinkle in a couple notes here and there. It makes it sound so much more connected to the chord you're playing because you're actually thinking about playing that chord. So here's what things sound like when I improvise by prioritizing these triad shapes and just sprinkling in a couple of notes here and there around the triad. Again, stick around those triads. Now you just have a couple more notes that you can add around them. When you stay around the triad, it's more likely you'll hit a chord tone. And again, chord tones are the nice sounding notes. And again, always be thinking about where you're going next. Predict the next shape you need to go into. Figure out how you're going to slide into that note. So just a couple minutes ago, we built these little kind of clusters that exist around these triad shapes. Now, here's the real light bulb moment. Those clusters we just looked at, they're part of the pentatonic scale shapes you already know how to play. So this D minor triad and this kind of little cluster, this is actually part of the 4th position of the D minor pentatonic. Again, all of these things are kind of related around the same place. We've got the chord, we've got the triad, we've got this scale shape. Right? Again, everything's connected. It makes the fretboard feel so much less confusing and a lot smaller actually as well, right? And again, this G major triad and this little fragment that we looked at, this is actually part of the 2nd pentatonic shape for the G major scale. So that right there was the G major pentatonic, the 2nd position of the G major pentatonic. And you can see this triad is hiding inside of it. And that little cluster that we played earlier was also inside of it. Same for this A major. Again, we just transpose everything we did for G up 2 frets. It's the same shape. So we have the A major triad. We have this little kind of pentatonic fragment that's around that triad. And then we have the full 2nd position of the A major pentatonic. And again, this bar chord as well. They're all around the same place on the fretboard. So seeing this connection, it gives you such a clearer picture of the fretboard. And it shows you how all these different things like chords, scales, triads, they all kind of interconnect, right? They're not separate from each other. They work with each other, right? But here's the trap. Just because you know the full pentatonic scale shape, you know where all these kind of chords and triads line up with them, that doesn't mean you have to use every single note inside of the pentatonic shape, right? You shouldn't be thinking about just relying on muscle memory and just letting your hands do all the work and playing every single note inside the shape. Just because you can see the whole scale, you can use the whole scale, doesn't mean you should use every single note every single time. If you think, I have to hit them all, your solos are going to sound like musical diarrhea, right? Instead, you want to keep your triad as the home base and think about using scale notes sparingly as just decorations to these triads. This way, you're choosing notes with intention instead of just mindlessly running up and down the scale. So to break this habit of noodling through these pentatonic shapes that we've played for years on end, right? We're going to use the beginning, middle, and end formula, right? A simple way to structure every phrase so it sounds musical instead of random and chaotic and disconnected. So this is the beginning. Now we're in the middle. End. Let's try that again on a different chord tone. Beginning. Middle. End. Let's do that again. Beginning. Middle. End. Now we're going to go to a new chord. Beginning. Middle. End. Now back to a different chord. Beginning. Middle. End. Now to a new chord. Beginning. Middle. Now, I've been teaching guitar for around 3 years at this point, specifically helping intermediate guitarists, and I've seen so many light bulb moments happen in real time as I watch students understand the power of triads and how to use them inside of their playing. If you're a guitarist who's been stuck in the exact same scale patterns for years, it's not really your fault, you just haven't really been shown the correct system that works for you yet. Inside my Triad Mastery program, I personally map out your plan, I coach you through every step along the way, and I give you the full course training so you can break through fast. You can click the link below, or you can scan the code on screen at the moment to get started and book a call with me, and we'll fix your random kind of pentatonic noodling problem for good. But if you don't want to leave YouTube just yet, you can click here for my next lesson, which also covers how to use triads to improvise. It might blow your mind how simple some of this stuff can be.